Welcome to I Am FemD. I am Femi FemD Agumbiade, lead composer for the hit animated series Iyanu, currently streaming on Cartoon Network and HBO Max. Today is the first episode in a series I'm calling How to Score, where every episode I break down how to compose music for a specific type of scene. If you're an aspiring composer or you just want to understand how the music in your favorite movies actually works, this series is for you. So hit subscribe and ring the bell because I'm going to be rolling these out one after another. Today we start where every composer eventually has to prove themselves, the action scene. Today I'm going to give you 7 tips that I feel will make the music for your action scenes stand out. But before I do that, you have to understand one principle that those tips all serve: tension and release. Scoring music for an action scene can be very intense. But here's the thing, if your music is cranked to 10 for the entire scene, your ears actually adjust within seconds and that intensity just flattens out. The audience stops feeling it. So the goal of an action cue isn't to be intense the whole time, but to control where the intensity goes, to wind the audience up, hold them there, and then release, so that when that big moment hits, it actually lands. Master that push and pull, and you're not only scoring the action, you're controlling it. Tip number 1 is one of my favorites because it's basically a magic trick for your ears: the Shepard tone. The Shepard tone is an auditory illusion. You layer the same note across multiple octaves, and as they move, the low ones fade out while the new high ones fade in. So it sounds like the pitch is forever rising, but it never actually gets any higher. It's the sonic version of an endless staircase. You've heard this in movies, even if you didn't know it. Hans Zimmer built almost the entire score of Dunkirk around it. That feeling that the tension is constantly climbing and never lets up, that's the Shepard tone. Fun fact, it's also the sound of the bat pod in The Dark Knight. There are several VSTs out there that can help you achieve this Shepard tone. One of them I use is in modern scoring strings, but I really like the Shepard tones in Metropolis Arc 5 from Orchestral Tools. They have the Shepard tone in the high strings, low strings. They even have some awesome choir Shepard tones. They sound amazing. Here's an example of what they sound like. So right here you can hear it slowly building. And right here it's rising. And rising. And rising. And it's just a really cool thing to tuck behind your score to actually give this feeling of tension. Here's an example of me using this technique in a cue that I scored for Iyanu. Tip number 2, mediant chords, specifically chromatic mediants. Without getting too deep into theory, these are chords whose roots are a third apart that don't normally belong together. Your ear doesn't expect it, so it creates this feeling of lift, of awe, or the ground shifting beneath you. So I can play this C chord, and then if I go to the third, which is an E, I know you've heard this sound. Film composers have been using chromatic mediants since forever. Now you can use this technique with any instrument, right? Strings, brass, but it's especially effective if you use a sample that has already captured the performance of those chords being played. Here's an example of what I'm talking about with Metropolis Arc 0. That just sounds amazing. Instant tension. Tip number 3, switch up your tempo. A common mistake is just locking the entire cue to one tempo and letting it run. It gets monotonous, and monotony is the enemy of tension. One of the first things I do when scoring an action scene is taking a look at the scene, watching it over and over again, and then use markers to determine hit points. Maybe at this point, I want to have a massive sting or drum hit. And at this point, where maybe the hero jumps into the air, I cut off the music entirely and just have this long sustaining brass note. And then when I come back in, just decide to change the tempo completely. Tempo is one of the most direct lines you have to the audience nervous system. Don't leave it on autopilot. And this ties perfectly to tip number 4, switching time signatures. When you jump from a steady 4/4 time signature into something like a 6/8 time signature, for instance, you throw the audience off balance, or at least make them excited and not bored. That instability is tension. A steady meter is comfortable, and in an action scene, that's not really what you want. Here's an example of what I'm talking about in the Iano series. Now, this episode has close to 500 plus tracks, so I think I'm going to consolidate all of them into a couple of stems so that I can just show you this example. Maybe that's a topic for another episode, how I group all of these tracks into just a couple of stems so that they can be delivered to the soundstage. If you want me to cover that topic, just go ahead and leave a note in the comments. So here I start off with one tempo. I break here to highlight Iano's dialogue. And here I switch up the instrumentation. Break here for this. Tip number 5 is transitions. This is the connective tissue, the glue, the stuff that moves you between the sections and amplifies the whole build and release cycle. 2 of my go-tos are risers and clusters. A riser is exactly what it sounds like, a sound that builds in pitch or intensity and continues to build and build until it slams into an impact or a drop or even silence. That is tension and release in its purest form. The riser is the tension, and the impact or maybe even the drop right after it is the release. A cluster is when you stack a bunch of dissonant notes right next to each other all at once. You can definitely stack those notes with any instrument of your choice. But like the example I gave earlier with the Shepard tones, it's always better when you have samples where players performed those techniques. You can find samples of cluster performances in the Synphobia series and even in Metropolis Arc 3, which I really love. There's so many things you can use for transitions. Cymbal crashes, suspended cymbals, drum rolls, weird sound design, even silence. The key thing is to place and time those transitions perfectly. The example I gave earlier with the Yanu chase scene seemed so seamless, even though there were different tempo changes, time signature changes, breaks. All of those things felt cohesive because of the transitions. And please don't have just one transition sound. Layer different transitions to beef up your production value. Here I have a crash and this deep boom impact, a whoosh sound, a suspended cymbal, and these drum rolls. Now listen to what they all sound like together. Now that's production value. Tip 6 is where you start to stand out from every other composer doing action. Use unique sounds and sound design. Anyone can load up an orchestral library or whatever library or VSTs we have there available to us. What makes your action scenes memorable is when you bring in sounds that nobody has heard before and shape them into music. Let me show you what I mean with a track of mine called Ready. It's a trailer track and it's streaming on all platforms. Trailer tracks, by the way, are a masterclass in tension and release. That's all they do. Here's what most people won't know. The starting blocks for Ready was built out of three sounds that nobody would expect: a stomach growl, a monkey screaming, and the ticking of a grandfather clock. Now here's that stomach growl again, without any effects. Now what I did was added some saturation, some distortion, some EQ moves, and now it sounds like this. Just a gnarly texture. And then when you add that grandfather clock into it, a ticking clock is one of the oldest tension devices there is. It's a literal countdown. Then I use the sound of the stomach growl to kind of inform what notes I should use for the bass. So I use this tuner just to kind of see what notes the growl was making. And then I just decided on these notes. And then I took that monkey scream, just added some saturation, some EQ, and a groove delay, and turned it into this. That's so sick. Now here's the full track in context. And that's enough for now. Like I said, it's streaming everywhere, so if you want to listen to it, you can. So look all around you. The most interesting sound you might have in your next action cue might be something in your kitchen. And finally, tip number 7, and maybe the most important one if you want your work to stand out: authenticity. One of the best ways to make an action scene feel real is to score it with instruments that belong in that world. Don't just default to the same orchestral sound that everybody else uses. Ask what this specific scene, this specific character would actually sound like. For example, in the Ianu series, she uses a fighting style called capoeira. It's an Afro-Brazilian martial art that's part fight and part dance. So in this scene where she's being chased by the mythical leopard Ekun, I didn't want to just use generic action percussion. I scored this scene with actual instruments of capoeira. The berimbau, that single string bow that leads every capoeira circle, and frame drums. Shout out to Blackwater Studios, who linked me up with an actual capoeira master who plays the berimbau and a practitioner who plays frame drums. Now, I have samples of the berimbau and frame drums, but there's nothing like live instruments and actually having live musicians play these instruments. This is what the berimbau sounds like. And here's what it sounds like with all the instruments. And that's the thing about authentic instruments. They don't just sound cool, they carry meaning. And that meaning is what makes an action scene stick with people long after the scene is over. And there you have it, 7 tips to bring tension and release into your action scenes. Now, for you aspiring composers, here's your homework. Pick one of these tips, just one, and use it in a cue this week. Maybe you build a Shepard tone. Maybe you raid your kitchen for a weird and unique sound. Whatever it is, just drop it in the comments and let me know what tip you tried. I read all my comments and maybe I'll feature one of my favorites in a future video. If you really enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button. It really helps the algorithm. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, because in the next episode of the How to Score series, we're going to flip the script completely. The next video will be how to score an emotional scene. That skill that gives the audience all the feels and makes the audience cry. You don't want to miss it. I'm FemD, and I'll catch you on the next one.